Today, President Trump hosted Poland's president, the first head of state visit since the pandemic began. The Eastern European leader arrived at the White House as President Trump confirmed plans to reduce the number of troops in longtime ally Germany, a decision that has sparked bipartisan resistance. Nick Schifrin has the story.
Today, the man who labels himself the Law and Order president hosted the candidate from the Law and Justice Party. And the bromance between President Trump and Polish President Andrzej Duda is between like-minded leaders.
I do believe he has an election coming up, and I do believe he'll be very successful.
Duda! I'm saying Duda! Back home, Duda is playing his trump card for his right-wing base 4 days before a tight election. He's argued LGBT rights are worse than communism. The EU and Freedom House accuse him of eroding Poland's rule of law.
This is a Polish president who has rolled back a democracy and the rule of law in Poland, who is running an increasingly authoritarian state.
Angela Stent is a former State Department official and intelligence officer, now at Georgetown Center for Eurasian, Russian, and East European Studies.
He believes that by coming to the United States and showing his population that President Trump values him as an ally, he can deliver a U.S. commitment to Poland, again to protect Poland against potential Russian threats.
For years, the U.S. has been conducting live fire exercises in Poland to deter neighboring Russia. There are now 4,400 American soldiers in Poland. Today, President Trump said that number would increase. These exercises that I visited were led by then Lieutenant General Ben Hodges.
That is a powerful capability that will be very effective at changing the calculus for Russia.
Hodges began his military career back when communist Poland was the largest country in the Eastern Bloc. As a lieutenant, Hodges deployed to Western Germany. One of 300,000 service members faced off with the Soviet Union. Today, there are 35,000 troops in Germany. Until late 2017, Hodges commanded U.S. Army Europe. He's now at the Center for European Policy Analysis.
The presence of U.S. troops in Germany benefits the United States. Germany gives us a forward station presence that allows us to carry out our national defense strategy and to conduct operations in Africa, the Middle East, as well as all over Europe.
But President Trump wants to cut the total number of U.S. troops deployed to Germany by a third and the number of troops who can travel through Germany in half.
I said, let's get it down from 50,000 to 25,000 because they're delinquent.
U.S. officials are frustrated that Germany spends 1.3% of its GDP on defense, below the promised 2%, and is resisting U.S. efforts to cancel an $11 billion pipeline with Russia.
They pay the country we're supposed to protect them from. They pay billions of dollars to that country. We're supposed to protect them. Excuse me, how does that work?
But the Germany reduction in forces was met with withering bipartisan opposition. Congressional officials were not consulted. The House Armed Services Committee's most senior Republican, Mac Thornberry, wrote it could leave behind a fractured, more dangerous, less stable world. And the House Foreign Affairs' most senior Republican, Mike McCaul, and other committee Republicans wrote to President Trump the withdrawal of thousands of troops from Germany will place U.S. national security at risk.
A 30% reduction of what's there now would seriously limit our ability to contribute to NATO, as well as to conduct the operations we need to around this half of the world.
German and NATO officials have said they weren't consulted either, and some military officials say the same.
I spoke to people from Army headquarters, Air Force headquarters, and at NATO and at U.S. European Command. They all were caught completely flat-footed.
This is really not how the United States should be conducting its foreign policy, and particularly on such a sensitive issue with what was, at least once, one of its key allies in Europe.
But those who advocate a more restrained U.S. foreign policy see an opportunity.
The argument that somehow we need to be in Europe so that we can be intervening elsewhere, for example, in the Middle East or in Afghanistan, sort of begs the larger question of whether or not we should be intervening in the Middle East and whether we should be continuing to fight a war in Afghanistan.
Andy Bacevich is a historian, retired colonel, and former West Point professor. He's now president of the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft.
This interventionist impulse, which has been really the defining feature of U.S. national security policy since the end of the Cold War simply has not delivered the goods. I think pulling out of Europe, ending our security commitment, should be one part of rethinking our overall security posture.
Today, President Trump said the number of troops in Germany would go down, with some going to Poland, which does meet the 2% goal.
We're going to be reducing our forces in Germany. Some will be coming home and some will be going to other places, but Poland would be one of those other places in Europe.
But Duda worried a reduction in Germany would send the wrong signal to Russia.
I do not deny that I requested to the president that he not withdraw U.S. forces from Europe.
Stent worries that a move to Poland could antagonize Russia. She's the author of Putin's World.
We shouldn't be needlessly provocative. And it's not clear that moving U.S. troops to Poland is any more in the U.S. national interest than keeping them in Germany.
Congress is debating whether to block the move out of Germany, but the Pentagon is already working on options to remove troops from a historic ally in Western Europe and increase them in its Eastern European neighbor. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Nick Schifrin.